Okay, today we're going to be talking about parts of an experiment. As you just saw in that video, Galileo had certain things that he had to control in his experiments, and then he would write down the results, analyze them, and communicate them. Today we're going to be talking about that testing and analyzing part. So, the things that Galileo had to have in his experiment that we call independent variables are what he changed. An independent variable is the one thing that is changed in an experiment. Now, it is basically what we want to test. I'm going to go back to that plant example that we talked about yesterday a lot. But basically, if you are comparing something, that's your independent variable. If you're changing something, that is your independent variable. And you should really just have one independent variable. We'll get to why that's really important in a little bit. A helpful hint to remember what an independent variable is that independent means one. If you are doing something independently, you are doing it on your own. So it's just one thing. So you should only be able to identify one independent variable in every experiment you do, because that's the variable that we want to test. When we think about the plants that we talked about yesterday in our testable questions and hypothesis, the thing that we were changing is how much water we give them. So changing the amount of water in those different plants is our independent variable. That's what we're going to change on purpose because that's what we want to test. The next type of variable is a dependent variable. Our dependent variable is the one thing that is measured in an experiment. So we've already talked about the change from yesterday. This is the measure. This is like your result. This is what you want to find out at the end. You should be writing down your observations when you get your measurement. You should be recording all of that data. And that is your dependent variable. A helpful way to remember this is because your dependent variable depends on your independent variable, or your measurement depends on what you change. So when you made a hypothesis about how the amount of water is going to affect the height that a plant grows, the height depends on the water. So that is why we call it the dependent variable. And in that example, the measurement of the height of the plant was actually the dependent variable. So the water was the independent variable. That's what we're changing. At the end, when we actually take out a ruler and measure the height of that plant, that is our dependent variable. So we have what we want to change. We have what we want to measure. We also need to make sure we have constants. A constant is going to be all of the things that we want to keep the same during our experiment. Constants are always going to stay the same, and the more constants we have, the better. An easy way to remember this is just to think about the word constant or constantly. It basically means to stay the same. If Mr. Summers is constantly starting off his class by talking about food, that means he's doing the same thing every single class. If you are constantly waking up late to advisory, that means you are doing the same thing every day. So a constant is going to be something that's staying the same. So when we think about constants for this experiment with our plant, there's a lot of constants you could have. And I put a picture here that shows some of those. So in this picture, the plant on the left is always the one getting watered. The plant on the right is not getting watered, or at least not as much water. But look at all the things that are the same. They're literally right next to each other, so they're in the same location. That means that they can get the same amount of sunlight. They're in the same exact size container. They look like they have the same exact type of soil. They even look like they are the same exact type of plant. We want to make sure that all of those things stay the same so that the only thing we're testing is how much water they have. If I do this with two different types of plants, now I'm testing the water and the type of plant. If I do this with one in the shade and one in the sun, now maybe my results aren't because of how much water they get. Maybe they're because of how much sun they get. So I want to make sure that the only thing I'm changing is the one independent variable. Everything else is staying constant or staying the same. So I'm going to have a slide up on the very next slide of your Nearpod lesson here that's going to be going through these same slides as review. This way, while you're watching your videos and while you're getting your instructions and doing some of your practice, you can always go back and look at these three definitions without having to watch the video over again. So you're going to continue by filling in the blank on the next couple of slides. You're going to have three different experiments set up, and your goal is to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the constant. You can go ahead and do that now, and if you need to review using the slideshow on the next slides, you can do that as well.